I'm Garrett Miller, 32, a successful software engineer with a generous heart. For 3 years, I funded my younger brother Ryan's entire life, from rent-to-car payments, totaling over $78,000. Despite the sacrifice, my parents had the audacity to call me Stingy when I finally said no. Little did they know, my refusal would force them to face a reality they'd been avoiding for years. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever had to set difficult boundaries with family. Growing up in suburban Minneapolis, my childhood wasn't exactly what you'd call balanced. From as early as I can remember, there was a clear hierarchy in our family of 4. My brother Ryan, 5 years my junior, always held the coveted position as the favorite child. It wasn't something my parents ever admitted outright, but their actions spoke volumes. When Ryan was born, I was old enough to notice how my parents' attention shifted. Family photos from that time tell the story perfectly, me standing slightly off to the side while my parents doted on baby Ryan. As we grew older, the pattern only intensified. Ryan's finger paintings earned prime refrigerator real estate, while my honor roll certificates were briefly acknowledged before being tucked away in a drawer. This dynamic shaped my personality in ways I didn't fully understand until adulthood. While Ryan grew accustomed to having everything handed to him, I became fiercely self-reliant. By 13, I was mowing lawns and shoveling driveways to earn my own spending money. By 16, I had saved enough from my part-time job at the local grocery store to buy my first car, a beaten-up 1998 Honda Civic that I meticulously maintained myself. Garrett's always been independent, my mother would tell relatives with a hint of pride that never quite reached her eyes. What she meant was that I had learned not to ask for anything. Meanwhile, Ryan would casually mention wanting the latest video game system, and it would magically appear on his birthday. Despite the clear favoritism, I excelled academically. My senior year, I earned a partial scholarship to the University of Minnesota for computer science. My parents attended my high school graduation, of course, but their congratulations felt perfunctory. The real celebration that year was for Ryan making the junior varsity basketball team, despite his mediocre performance. College was a financial struggle. My scholarship covered about half my tuition, but everything else fell on my shoulders. I juggled 3 part-time jobs, morning shifts at a coffee shop, weekend work at a tech repair store, and evening hours in the computer lab. I lived on ramen noodles and free campus event food, while across town, my parents were paying for Ryan's SAT prep courses and taking him on college tours. The hard work paid off. I graduated with honors and minimal student loans, landing a job at a prestigious tech company in Seattle. Within 2 years, I received 3 promotions and was earning 6 figures. By 27, I had saved enough for a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood outside the city. Ryan's path took a different direction. Despite all the advantages he'd been given, he barely graduated high school with a 2.3 GPA. He attended the state university on our parents' dime, but spent more time partying than studying. His Snapchat stories showcased his beer pong prowess rather than any academic achievements. No one was surprised when he dropped out after 3 semesters, having changed his major 4 times. He's just finding himself, my father would defend when relatives inquired about Ryan's progress. Not everyone knows what they want to do right away like Garrett did. This comment always stung. I hadn't known what I wanted, any more than Ryan had. The difference was that I didn't have the luxury of drifting aimlessly on someone else's dollar. When I moved to Seattle, I met Megan, a pediatric nurse with a kind heart and sharp mind. Our relationship progressed naturally, and after a year of dating, she moved into my house. Megan was the first person who truly noticed the dysfunctional dynamic with my family. "It's weird how your parents treat you," she observed after our first Christmas together, where we'd flown back to Minneapolis. "They talk about how successful you are to everyone else, but they barely asked you a single question about your life. She was right. The entire holiday had centered around Ryan's latest venture. A podcast about craft beer that had exactly 12 subscribers. My recent promotion to senior software engineer warranted only a passing "That's nice, dear," from my mother. Megan also noticed how my parents subtly undermined my confidence. Comments like, "Garrett was always so serious," or "Garrett never really had many friends," were dropped casually into conversation, painting me as some sort of socially awkward workaholic, when in reality, I had a fulfilling social life and plenty of hobbies. "They make it sound like you're some kind of robot," Megan whispered to me during one particularly frustrating dinner conversation. "Do they even know you?" The truth was, they didn't. They had created a narrative about me that suited their perspective: Garrett, the self-sufficient son who didn't need them. This conveniently justified their emotional and financial investment in Ryan, the struggling son who seemingly couldn't survive without their constant support. By the time I turned 30, I had created a comfortable life for myself. I had a stable relationship, a home, a successful career, and a small but loyal group of friends. Ryan, at 25, was living in a rundown apartment with 2 roommates, working sporadically as a bartender, and still relying on our parents for financial support. Little did I know that the familiar family dynamic was about to shift dramatically, placing an unexpected burden squarely on my shoulders. The call came on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. I was just finishing dinner with Megan when my phone lit up with my mother's name. "Garrett, honey." Her voice had that syrupy quality it always took on when she wanted something. "We have a bit of a situation with Ryan." The situation turned out to be that Ryan had lost his job at the local sports bar, the 3rd position he'd been fired from in 8 months. According to my mother, it wasn't his fault, of course. The manager had unreasonable expectations about punctuality and didn't understand that sometimes you need a mental health day. "The problem is," my mother continued, "Ryan's rent is due next week, and your father and I are a little tight this month with the bathroom renovation." I gripped the phone tighter. "What exactly are you asking, Mom?" "Well, we were hoping you might be able to help Ryan out, just temporarily. You're doing so well, and it would only be for a month until he finds another job." The request hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Part of me wanted to remind her of all the times I'd struggled financially during college while they paid for Ryan's fraternity dues. But another part, the part that still desperately wanted their approval, saw an opportunity to finally be the son they needed. "How much is his rent?" I asked, ignoring Megan's raised eyebrows from across the table. $1,500, my mother replied quickly, as if afraid I'd changed my mind. "Plus maybe a little extra for utilities and groceries." "He's really in a tough spot, Garrett." $1,500 was a significant amount, but not one that would break my bank. After a moment's hesitation, I agreed, telling myself it was just a one-time thing to help my brother through a rough patch. That evening, Megan voiced her concerns. "I understand wanting to help your brother, but I'm worried your parents are taking advantage of your success." "It's just this once," I assured her, though something in my gut told me otherwise. I was right to be skeptical. The first month's loan quickly turned into a second when Ryan claimed he was still job hunting. By the 3rd month, I was not only paying his rent but also his utilities, car payment, and phone bill. Each time, the request came wrapped in promises that it was just until he gets back on his feet. 4 months into this arrangement, I discovered through an Instagram post that Ryan had purchased a new PlayStation 5 and several games, a collection worth nearly $700. When I called to confront him, his response left me stunned. "What's the big deal? You make like $1 bazillion at your tech job. This is the only thing that keeps me from being totally depressed about being unemployed." When I expressed my frustration that he was spending money on luxury items while I was covering his basic needs, he became defensive. "Wow. I didn't realize helping your brother came with so many strings attached." Mom and Dad were right, success really has changed you. That manipulation tactic worked exactly as intended. Suddenly I was apologizing to him, assuring him that I was happy to help and just wanted to make sure he was focusing on finding work. The conversation ended with Ryan promising to apply for jobs that week, a promise I knew instinctively would be broken. When I mentioned the gaming system to my parents, hoping they might back me up, they instead defended Ryan. "He needs something to keep his spirits up during this difficult time," my father explained, as if unemployment was something that had happened to Ryan rather than a direct consequence of his actions. "You've always had it easier, Garrett," my mother added. "Jobs just fall into your lap." Ryan struggles with interviews because he gets nervous. I wanted to point out that jobs didn't fall into my lap. I had worked hard, built a strong resume, and networked extensively. But I knew from experience that this argument would go nowhere. Despite my growing resentment, I continued supporting Ryan. Each month, I transferred money to his account, telling myself it was temporary. Megan grew increasingly concerned. "This is becoming a pattern," she warned 6 months into the arrangement. "They're treating your success like it's a family resource, but I don't see them asking Ryan to contribute when he does have money." She was right. When Ryan briefly held a job at a coffee shop, none of that income went toward paying me back or building his savings. Instead, he took a weekend trip to Chicago with friends, posting pictures of expensive restaurants and nightclubs. By the 1-year mark of supporting Ryan, my financial commitment had expanded even further. When his car needed repairs, I paid the $2,000 mechanic bill. When he got a speeding ticket, I covered that too. Each time, the justification was that if I didn't help, he wouldn't be able to get to job interviews or would damage his credit score, making his future even more difficult. Megan and I had been planning to upgrade to a larger house as we discussed our future together, but those plans were put on hold as thousands of dollars flowed to my brother each month. I was also delaying proposing to her, partly because the ring I wanted to buy for her kept getting pushed down my financial priority list. "I love your brother because he's your family," Megan told me during a rare argument about our finances. "But I'm starting to feel like we're putting our lives on hold while subsidizing his irresponsibility." As the support continued into a second year, I made multiple attempts to help Ryan find stable employment. I rewrote his resume, sent him job listings, and even used my professional contacts to arrange interviews. He either didn't show up, arrived unprepared, or managed to say something inappropriate that disqualified him immediately. "Maybe corporate jobs just aren't for me," he'd say with a shrug. "I'm more of a creative type." Yet his creative pursuits, from the beer podcast to a brief stint selling handmade jewelry on Etsy, never generated any meaningful income. They were hobbies at best, excuses at worst. The toll wasn't just financial. Every family gathering became tense as I noticed Ryan's lifestyle improving while mine stagnated. He had new clothes, the latest iPhone, and stories about restaurants I couldn't afford to visit because I was too busy paying his bills. Meanwhile, my parents continued to treat him as the one who needed their emotional support, while I was still the successful son who had everything figured out. 27 months into supporting my brother, I felt trapped in a situation of my own making. I was enabling behavior that showed no signs of changing, but every time I considered cutting the financial cord, guilt overwhelmed me. What would happen to Ryan? Would my parents forgive me? Was I willing to damage my family relationships over money? Little did I know, the situation was approaching a breaking point that would force everyone's hand, including mine. By the 30th month of supporting Ryan, I had a spreadsheet detailing every dollar spent. The numbers were staggering. In just under 3 years, I had given my brother $78,432. This included monthly expenses, $1, $500 for rent, $220 for utilities, $375 for car payment, $140 for car insurance, $110 for phone bill, $400 for groceries and miscellaneous expenses, plus numerous emergency expenses, $2, $100 for car repairs, $3,200 for dental work he'd neglected, $1,800 for a lawyer after a minor legal incident, $900 for a new laptop when his stopped working, $4, $500 in overdue credit card bills that were about to go to collections. The spreadsheet made the situation painfully clear. I was funding a lifestyle that I myself couldn't enjoy because I was too busy paying for someone else to live it. Meanwhile, Ryan's living situation had steadily improved. He had moved from his original apartment with roommates to a one-bedroom place in a trendy neighborhood. His social media showcased weekly dinners at upscale restaurants, new designer clothes, and weekend trips to nearby cities, all while supposedly being broke and job hunting. One particularly frustrating incident occurred when Megan and I had to cancel our modest anniversary weekend trip to Portland because I'd just covered Ryan's car insurance for 6 months in advance. That same weekend, Ryan posted photos from a spur-of-the-moment trip to Las Vegas with friends. "I needed to blow off some steam," he explained when I called him. "Job hunting is really stressful." The irony might have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. Megan and I had been planning to buy a larger house in a neighborhood with better schools, as we'd been discussing starting a family. But with the constant drain on my finances, our down payment fund grew at a snail's pace. Similarly, the engagement ring I'd been saving for remained out of reach as each month brought new, essential, expenses from Ryan. The strain began affecting my relationship with Megan. While she remained supportive, I could see her growing frustration when we had to carefully budget for a simple dinner out while my brother lived consequence-free. "I'm starting to feel like we're the financially irresponsible ones," she commented one evening after we decided against ordering dessert to save money. "We work hard, make good incomes, yet we're pinching pennies while Ryan lives like he's on vacation." My professional life began suffering as well. The constant stress of managing two households' finances led to sleepless nights and distracted workdays. For the first time in my career, I received a performance review that mentioned my decreased focus and engagement. Throughout this period, I made numerous attempts to help Ryan become self-sufficient. I sent him job listings daily. I offered to pay for vocational training or certification courses. I introduced him to professional contacts who might mentor him. I even researched life coaches who specialized in helping adults find their career path. Ryan's responses ranged from half-hearted promises to outright rejection. "Those jobs look boring. I don't want to be stuck in an office like you. I'm waiting for something that really speaks to my passions. Why are you so obsessed with traditional employment? Not everyone wants that life." My parents were no help. Every conversation about Ryan's future ended with them defending his journey and reminding me how different we were. "You've always known exactly what you wanted," my mother would say, rewriting history once again. "Ryan's more sensitive, more creative. The right opportunity just hasn't come along yet." The reality was that plenty of opportunities had come along. Ryan simply rejected them because they involved work, responsibility, and starting at the bottom like everyone else. During a rare honest moment over drinks, Ryan admitted, "Why would I take some entry-level job making $20 an hour when you're already giving me more than that to do nothing?" His candor shocked me, but at least it was the truth. I had created a situation where working was financially disadvantageous for him. Why struggle at a job when your brother will fund your lifestyle regardless? The financial burden grew heavier each month. I began dipping into my savings, then my investment accounts. The retirement fund I diligently built since my first job saw its first withdrawals not for my future, but for my brother's present. Megan's patience was wearing thin. After 3 years of our lives being dictated by Ryan's needs, she finally issued a gentle ultimatum. "I love you, Garrett, and I want a future with you. But I can't build that future with someone who's financially tied to supporting another adult indefinitely. Something has to change. She was right. Something did have to change. And as it turned out, the catalyst for that change was already in motion, though not in a way any of us could have predicted. The email from Ryan's landlord arrived on a Thursday morning, buried among work messages and promotional offers. The subject line was innocuous enough. Regarding Unit 403. I almost deleted it, assuming it was meant for Ryan, but something made me open it. Dear Mr. Miller, it began. Despite our multiple warnings regarding noise complaints and unauthorized guests, your brother has continued to violate the terms of his lease. We regret to inform you that we will not be renewing the agreement when it expires next month. Additionally, due to the damage to the property discovered during our inspection, a significant portion of the security deposit will be withheld. I sat staring at my computer screen, a mixture of anger and exhaustion washing over me. Not only had Ryan managed to get himself evicted, but he'd apparently damaged the apartment I was paying for. The landlord's email continued, detailing late-night parties, complaints from neighbors, and even a small fire in the kitchen that Ryan had never mentioned. Before I could fully process this information, my phone rang. It was my mother. Have you spoken to Ryan today? She asked, her voice tense. No, but I just got an email from his landlord. He's being evicted. Yes, he told us. It's not his fault, though. The neighbors are just sensitive about noise. And the landlord has had it out for him from the beginning. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. Mom, the email mentioned multiple warnings, unauthorized guests, and property damage. This isn't about sensitive neighbors. Well, that's not how Ryan explained it, she replied dismissively. Anyway, that's not why I'm calling. Ryan's found a new place. A lovely condo in Belltown. It's a bit more expensive, but it's in a much better neighborhood with amenities. He'll need first and last month's rent plus security deposit by next week. How much? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. $5,000 total. I know it's a lot, but think of it as an investment in his future. A nicer environment might be just what he needs to get motivated. The request hung between us, so familiar it was almost routine. Except this time, something inside me snapped. No, I said simply. Excuse me? I said no, Mom. I'm not paying for Ryan's new condo. In fact, I'm not paying for anything else. I've supported him for 3 years, and nothing has changed. He's not looking for work. He's not saving money. He's not making any effort to become independent. There was a long pause before my mother responded, her voice cold. I can't believe how selfish you've become, Garrett. This is your brother we're talking about. Selfish? I repeated, incredulous. I've given Ryan over $78,000 in the past 3 years. How exactly does that make me selfish? You've always been the financially responsible one. Ryan struggles with these things. As the successful brother, it's your duty to help him. That word, duty, hit me like a physical blow. Was that all I was to them? An ATM with familial obligations? I'm hanging up now, Mom. I need some time to think. That evening, Megan came home to find me surrounded by financial statements, credit card bills, and my laptop displaying the spreadsheet of Ryan's expenses. What's all this? She asked cautiously. I explained the situation, the eviction, my mother's request, and my refusal. I'm proud of you, she said, sitting beside me. I know how hard that must have been. I'm not sure I did the right thing, I admitted. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am being selfish. Megan took my hand. Garrett, we need to talk about our future. I've been patient because I love you, but this situation isn't sustainable. I want to marry you. I want to start a family with you. But I can't do that if we're financially supporting your brother indefinitely. Her words crystallized something I'd been avoiding for years. I had been postponing my own life, my own happiness. to fund someone else's irresponsibility. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with a financial advisor. The meeting was sobering. Not only had I spent over $78,000 on Ryan, but I'd also lost potential investment returns on that money. If I had invested it instead, it would have been worth significantly more. Additionally, the constant withdrawals from my savings had set my retirement plans back by years. If you continue at this rate, the advisor warned, you'll never be able to achieve your personal financial goals. Supporting another adult is essentially taking on a second mortgage without the benefit of building equity. That weekend, Megan and I were having brunch at our favorite cafe when my phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from Ryan's friend Tyler, who I'd met a few times at family events. The message contained only a photo, Ryan behind the bar at a local pub, mixing drinks. The timestamp showed it was from the previous night. My mind raced. Ryan had told me just 3 days earlier that he was still unemployed and pounding the pavement, looking for work. Yet here he was, clearly working as a bartender. A quick search on social media confirmed my suspicions. Ryan had been working at his friend's bar for at least 4 months, based on tagged photos and check-ins. All while claiming unemployment and accepting my financial support. The betrayal cut deep. Not just a lie, but the calculated deception over months. I called Ryan immediately. But he didn't pick up. Instead, he texted back, "Can't talk now." "What's up?" "We need to talk about your job at the Rusty Nail," I wrote. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response came through. "Who told you about that?" Not a denial. Not an apology. Just concern about who had exposed his lie. I drove to his apartment, determined to have this conversation face to face. Ryan answered the door in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, looking like he'd just woken up despite it being 2 p.m. "You've been working this whole time?" I asked without preamble. Ryan shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's just a few shifts a week, under the table. Not enough to live on. But enough to lie about. Enough to keep hidden while I pay all your bills." "It's not like that," he protested weakly. "The money I make there is just for extras. Without your help, I'd still be screwed. Extras like trips to Vegas? New clothes? Dinners out several times a week?" His expression hardened. "Are you monitoring my social media now? That's pretty creepy, bro." The deflection was so transparent it was almost laughable. "Almost. I'm done, Ryan," I said quietly. "No more money. No more support. You're on your own starting now. You can't be serious." He scoffed. "What am I supposed to do about rent? About my car payment? The same thing every other adult does. Get a job, a real one, on the books, and pay your own bills." Ryan's face flushed with anger. "I'm going to call Mom and Dad. They're not going to let you do this." "Go ahead," I replied, turning to leave. "I'm done with this conversation." My phone rang less than 20 minutes later. My father's name flashed on the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail but decided it was better to face this head-on. "How dare you threaten to cut off your brother?" he began without greeting. "After everything we've done for you." The irony of that statement was so profound I actually laughed. "Everything you've done for me? Dad, I worked my way through college while you paid Ryan's fraternity dues. I built my career through hard work while you made excuses for Ryan's laziness. I've supported him financially for 3 years while you've enabled his irresponsibility. That's not fair." My father sputtered. "We raised you. Put a roof over your head. That's called being a parent." I interrupted. "It was your choice to have children. My choice is to stop funding Ryan's lifestyle while he lies to me and works under the table. He told us about that." My mother chimed in from the extension. "It's just a few hours here and there. Hardly constitutes a real job." "Then he needs to find a real job," I replied firmly. "I'm not having this argument anymore. I've made my decision. If you do this, my father said, his voice dangerously low, don't expect to remain part of this family. The threat hung in the air between us. For a moment, I felt like that child again, desperate for approval and acceptance. But I wasn't that child anymore. If your definition of family is based on financial transactions, then maybe that's for the best, I replied, ending the call before they could respond. That night, I cried for the first time in years. Megan held me as I grieved not just for the potential loss of my family, but for the recognition that perhaps what I thought was family had never really existed at all. The week after I cut off Ryan's financial support was a tsunami of texts, calls, and emotional manipulation. My phone buzzed constantly with messages ranging from guilt trips to outright threats. From Ryan, I can't believe you're doing this to me. I thought brothers were supposed to have each other's backs. From my mother, your father hasn't slept in days. Is this how you want to repay us for everything we've sacrificed for you? From my father, no son of mine would abandon his family like this. Think carefully about the choice you're making. I stopped answering after the first day, unable to withstand the barrage of emotional manipulation. Instead, I forwarded Ryan links to job listings, apartment hunting websites, and financial planning resources. Each one was met with either silence or dismissive responses. These jobs only pay $25 per hour. That's poverty wages in Seattle. These apartments are all in terrible neighborhoods. I can't live somewhere unsafe. The irony that $25 per hour was significantly more than he was making at his under-the-table bartending gig seemed lost on him. As was the fact that the terrible neighborhoods were exactly where Megan and I had started out before working our way up. 10 days after my decision, my mother called with a different approach. Her voice was honey-sweet, reminiscent of how she spoke to Ryan when trying to soothe his tantrums as a child. Honey, we've all been so emotional lately. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? Just family, to talk things through calmly. Against Megan's advice, I agreed. Maybe we can actually have a productive conversation, I told her. Though neither of us really believed it. The dinner was a disaster from the moment I arrived. My parents' house, the same one I'd grown up in, felt suddenly foreign and hostile. Ryan sat at the table looking sullen, my father barely acknowledged my presence, and my mother fluttered around nervously, trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. We made it through appetizers with stilted small talk before my father cleared his throat. So, Garrett, your mother and I have been thinking about the situation with Ryan. I braced myself. Yes? We understand you might be going through some financial difficulties of your own. Perhaps Megan has expensive tastes, or you've made some poor investments. I stared at him, dumbfounded. That's not it at all. I'm financially stable. I'm just not willing to support Ryan indefinitely while he makes no effort to support himself. That's harsh, Ryan interjected. I'm trying. The job market is tough right now. You've been working at the Rusty Nail for months without telling me. I reminded him. That's not trying, that's deliberate deception. It's just a few shifts, my mother said dismissively. Hardly enough to live on. Then he needs to get more shifts, or a second job, or a better job. That's what adults do. My father's face darkened. You've changed, Garrett. Success has made you cold. When did money become more important than family? This isn't about money, I insisted. It's about responsibility. It's about Ryan learning to stand on his own 2 feet. That's easy for you to say, Ryan snapped. Everything's always been easy for you. That comment ignited something in me. Years of resentment and unspoken truths bubbled to the surface. Easy? Are you kidding me? I worked 3 jobs through college while you partied on mom and dad's dime. I built my career from nothing while you bounced between half-hearted attempts at employment. I saved carefully while you spent recklessly. Nothing about my life has been easy, Ryan. The difference is that I didn't expect someone else to solve my problems for me. The table fell silent. My mother's eyes welled with tears. A sight that once would have immediately made me backtrack and apologize. Not this time. If you don't start helping your brother again, my father said quietly, you're no longer welcome in this family. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I looked at each of their faces, my father's stern disapproval, my mother's manipulative tears. Ryan's entitled expectation, and realized something profound. This wasn't love. This was financial exploitation wrapped in familial obligation. Then I guess I don't have a family anymore, I replied, standing up. Because I won't set myself on fire to keep Ryan warm. I left without finishing dinner, my hands shaking as I drove home. When I told Megan what had happened, she held me tightly. They're bluffing, she assured me. They'll come around once they realize you're serious. But they weren't bluffing, at least not immediately. Ryan moved back in with my parents, who promised to help him through this tough time. They announced this decision via group text that included extended family members, positioning themselves as the loving, supportive parents stepping up where I had failed. The narrative they crafted was clear. Garrett, the successful but cold-hearted son, had abandoned his struggling brother out of selfishness. They were the heroes, sacrificing their retirement comfort to support their younger son. For weeks, I questioned my decision. The guilt was overwhelming at times. I had grown up defining myself as the good son, the responsible one, the one who took care of others. Rejecting that role felt like rejecting my very identity. I started seeing a therapist, something I'd never considered before. Dr. Winters helped me recognize the dysfunctional patterns that had defined my family relationships for decades. You were parentified at a young age, she explained during one session. Made to feel responsible for your brother's well-being while simultaneously being told you didn't need support yourself. That creates a perfect storm of guilt and obligation that can be exploited indefinitely. With her help, I began to untangle my sense of self-worth from my family's approval. I stopped checking social media where relatives posted thinly veiled comments about family loyalty and helping those in need. I focused instead on rebuilding the parts of my life that had been on hold for years. Megan was my rock throughout this period. Her unwavering support and clear-eyed perspective helped me maintain boundaries when my resolve weakened. Your parents are adults too, she reminded me. They're making choices just like you are. If they choose to support Ryan financially, that's their decision. But they can't force you to do the same. 6 weeks after the disastrous family dinner, my cousin Alexis called. We had been close as children but had drifted apart in adulthood. Her call surprised me. I wanted to check on you, she said. The family gossip machine is working overtime. But I figured there's more to the story than what Aunt Linda is telling everyone. I explained the situation, the 3 years of support, Ryan's deception, my parents' ultimatum. Alexis listened without interruption. That tracks, she said when I finished. Aunt Linda and Uncle Dave have always treated Ryan like he's made of glass. Remember when he failed sophomore algebra and they blamed the teacher? The validation from someone who knew my family dynamics felt like a weight lifting. Alexis wasn't the only one. Over the following weeks, several friends and extended family members reached out, many sharing similar observations about the imbalanced treatment Ryan and I had received throughout our lives. Though the estrangement from my immediate family was painful, I found myself surrounded by a chosen family of friends and supporters who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide financially. As winter turned to spring, I began to feel a sense of peace with my decision. The guilt still surfaced occasionally, but it no longer controlled me. I was learning to recognize manipulation tactics for what they were and to trust my own judgment about what constituted healthy relationships. What I didn't realize was that while I was healing and growing, my parents were about to face the reality I had been dealing with for years. The challenge of supporting an adult child who had never learned to support himself. 2 months after I cut off financial support to Ryan, I received an unexpected text from my mother. Your father's back is acting up again. Doctor says he needs to rest, but he's taken a part-time job at Home Depot. Thought you should know. The message was clearly designed to trigger my guilt. But it also revealed something significant. My father had come out of retirement to work. The implications were obvious. Supporting Ryan was straining their finances enough that additional income was necessary. I chose not to respond, following my therapist's advice about maintaining boundaries. But I did notice increased activity on my father's LinkedIn profile, which had been dormant for years since his retirement. He was now listed as a part-time sales associate at Home Depot, working 25 hours a week. My mother's subtle attempts to restart my financial support continued. Each message carefully crafted to inform me of their struggles while never directly asking for money. Had to cancel our annual trip to Florida this year. Such a shame. Your father's arthritis is really flaring up from standing all day at work. We've been eating a lot of casseroles lately. Trying to be budget conscious. Each message left unanswered became easier than the last. I was learning that I wasn't responsible for the consequences of their choices. 3 months in, I heard through my cousin Alexis that Ryan had finally started looking for legitimate employment. His under-the-table bartending gig hadn't provided enough income to maintain his lifestyle. And my parents' support came with more strings attached than mine had. They expected him to help around their house and adhere to a curfew, conditions that chafed against his independent living habits. He's been complaining about it nonstop, Alexis reported after a family gathering I hadn't been invited to. Apparently, your dad confiscated his PlayStation until he brought home proof of job applications. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents were finally imposing the kind of boundaries I had suggested years ago. Boundaries they had criticized me for even considering. For months after cutting Ryan off, I ran into my mother's friend Susan at the grocery store. The encounter was awkward at first. Susan had clearly heard one version of the family drama, but as we talked, her perspective seemed to shift. Your mother mentioned you boys were having some difficulties, she said carefully. But she didn't mention Ryan was living with them again. That must be challenging. I wouldn't know, I replied. We haven't spoken in months. Susan's eyebrows rose. Really? The way Linda described it, you were still very much involved, just being difficult about money. This revelation, that my mother was misrepresenting the situation to save face, didn't surprise me, but it did confirm my suspicions about the narrative being spread through their social circle. As spring turned to summer, reports from various family members painted a clear picture. My parents were struggling with the reality of supporting Ryan. My father was working despite his back problems. My mother had taken up babysitting for neighborhood children to earn extra cash. Their carefully planned retirement was being redirected to support their 30-year-old son who still wasn't fully employed. Meanwhile, Ryan was experiencing real consequences for perhaps the first time in his adult life. Without my financial cushion, he had to make difficult choices about spending priorities. According to Alexis, he had sold his gaming systems, downgraded his phone plan, and started taking the bus instead of using his car for every trip. 5 months after my decision, the family narrative began to shift. Extended family members who had initially condemned my abandonment of Ryan started to recognize the unsustainability of my parents' situation. Questions that had never been asked before were finally being voiced. Why isn't Ryan working full-time? Shouldn't he be contributing to household expenses? How long do Linda and Dave plan to support him? These were the very questions I had been asking for years, questions that had been dismissed as unfeeling or selfish when they came from me. The turning point came when my parents hosted their annual summer barbecue. I wasn't invited, of course, but Alexis attended and called me immediately afterward. You wouldn't believe what happened, she said, her voice a mixture of shock and satisfaction. Uncle Dave lost it on Ryan in front of everyone. According to Alexis, The incident began when Ryan complained loudly about having to help with the grilling instead of socializing. My father, stressed from working part-time while managing his back pain, finally snapped. "You live in our house rent-free, eat our food, use our utilities, and you can't even help with a damn barbecue without complaining?" He had shouted, loud enough for all the guests to hear. "Maybe Garrett was right about you after all." That last sentence, the first acknowledgement that my perspective might have merit, sent shockwaves through the family. The carefully constructed narrative of the selfish older brother and the struggling younger one began to crumble as relatives witnessed firsthand the entitlement that had frustrated me for years. In the weeks that followed, small cracks appeared in the family's united front against me. My Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, reached out with an awkward but well-intentioned message. "Your father seems very stressed lately. I know you boys have had your differences, but family is family. Maybe it's time to talk?" I replied politely but firmly. "I'm open to reconciliation when everyone is ready to have an honest conversation about boundaries and expectations. Until then, I'm focusing on my own well-being." 6 months after cutting off support, I received the text I had been both expecting and dreading. From my father. "We need to talk. Just you and me." We met at a neutral location. A coffee shop halfway between our homes. My father looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his posture slightly stooped from his back problems. For a moment, guilt threatened to overwhelm me, but I reminded myself of Dr. Winter's words. "Guilt is not a reliable indicator of wrongdoing." "You look well," my father said after we had ordered our coffees. "Thanks. How are you and Mom? And Ryan?" He sighed heavily. "That's why I wanted to talk. It's been challenging. Ryan is still living with us. He has a part-time job at Target now. But it's not enough for him to live independently. Your mother and I are dipping into our retirement savings each month to make ends meet." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I didn't understand before," he admitted, staring into his coffee. "Supporting another adult, it's a bottomless pit. The more we give, the more he seems to need." "I know," I said quietly. "That's what I tried to explain. We thought it would be temporary," he continued. "A few months of help until he got back on his feet. But it's been half a year now, and nothing has really changed. He's not saving money. He's not looking for better opportunities. He just exists." The parallels to my own experience were striking, but I resisted the urge to say, "I told you so." Instead, I asked, "What are you going to do?" My father looked up, his eyes tired but determined. "We're setting a deadline. 3 more months, and then he needs to be self-sufficient. Your mother doesn't agree yet, but she'll come around. We can't keep doing this, not just financially, but for Ryan's sake too. We haven't done him any favors by shielding him from reality all these years." It was the most self-aware statement I'd ever heard from my father. As we continued talking, he acknowledged other truths that had long gone unspoken, the favoritism they had shown Ryan, the different standards they had held us to, the ways they had taken my independence for granted while nurturing Ryan's dependence. "I can't speak for your mother yet," he said as we prepared to leave. "But for what it's worth, I understand your decision better now. And I'm sorry for the things I said. It wasn't a full reconciliation. But it was a start, an acknowledgement that perhaps the problem had never been my unwillingness to help, but the unsustainable expectations that had been placed on me." As I drove home from that meeting, I felt lighter than I had in months. The road to repairing these relationships would be long, and might never reach full restoration. But for the first time, I could see a path forward that didn't require sacrificing my own well-being for someone else's comfort. Reality had finally done what years of my warnings couldn't. It had shown my family the true cost of enabling dependence. And while the lesson had been painful for everyone involved, it was perhaps the most valuable gift I could have given them, the gift of truth, however unwelcome it might have been at first. 6 months after my coffee with my father, Megan and I stood on a beach in Maui at sunset, surrounded by our closest friends. As she said, "I do," I slipped onto her finger the engagement ring I'd finally been able to purchase, not the one I'd originally planned 3 years earlier, but a more beautiful one that symbolized our journey together through difficult times. "You may now kiss the bride," the officiant announced, and as I leaned in to kiss my wife for the first time, I caught sight of my parents and Ryan standing among our guests. Their presence was the result of months of careful reconciliation, a process that had been neither quick nor easy, but necessary for all of us. After my father's realization about the unsustainability of supporting Ryan indefinitely, things had changed gradually but significantly. True to his word, he and my mother had set a deadline for Ryan to become self-sufficient. When the deadline arrived and Ryan was still only working part-time with no savings plan, they had made the difficult decision to follow through on their ultimatum. "He has 2 weeks to find his own place," my mother had told me during one of our newly reinstated weekly phone calls. "Your father and I are paying for the security deposit and first month's rent as a final contribution, but after that, he's on his own." Ryan had not taken the news well. There had been shouting, accusations, and attempts at emotional manipulation, all the tactics that had worked so effectively in the past. But my parents, having experienced firsthand the challenges of supporting an adult child, stood firm. The apartment Ryan eventually found was small and in an unfashionable neighborhood, similar to my first place after college. His job at Target became full-time, and when that still wasn't enough to cover all his expenses, he took a second job delivering food on weekends. For the first time in his adult life, he was experiencing the real consequences of his financial choices. Our relationship as brothers had been the slowest to heal. The resentment on both sides ran deep, his anger at what he perceived as my abandonment, my frustration at his years of exploitation. But a breakthrough came 4 months before my wedding, when Ryan called me out of the blue. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice lacking its usual defensiveness. "I took advantage of you for years, and when you finally set a boundary, I made you the bad guy. I'm sorry." The conversation that followed was the most honest we'd ever had. Ryan admitted that he had always been jealous of my success, that it had been easier to paint me as cold and uncaring than to acknowledge his own lack of effort. I confessed that I had enabled his behavior out of a desperate need for family approval, something I was still working through in therapy. We didn't become best friends overnight. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But we began taking small steps, occasional text messages, a monthly phone call, and eventually, lunch together when I visited our parents. During one of these lunches, Ryan shared something that surprised me. "You know, as much as I hated you for cutting me off at the time, it was probably the best thing anyone's ever done for me." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I never had to grow up before," he explained. "Everyone always fixed things for me, Mom, Dad, you. When that stopped, it was like, suddenly I had to figure out who I actually was without all the help. And I didn't like that person very much." This self-awareness was new for Ryan, a sign of genuine maturity developing. He wasn't transformed overnight into a financial wizard or career success, but he was supporting himself, paying his own bills, and making his own decisions, both good and bad. My parents' journey had been equally transformative. Their retirement plans had taken a hit from the months of supporting Ryan, but they were adjusting to their new reality. More importantly, they were reckoning with the role they had played in creating the family dynamics that had caused so much pain. "We thought we were protecting Ryan," my mother admitted during a surprisingly candid conversation before the wedding. "But we were really just protecting ourselves from having to watch him struggle. We didn't want to see him fail, so we made sure he never had to try." The wedding itself was a perfect illustration of how far we'd all come. My father, in his toast, acknowledged both the past and the future, to Garrett and Megan. You've taught us all that true love isn't about enabling or rescuing, but about supporting each other to be your best selves. We're proud of the man you've become, son. Even when it was difficult for us to understand your choices. Ryan served as a groomsman, not the best man. That honor went to my friend Marcus, who had supported me throughout the family conflict, but his presence in the wedding party symbolized the healing that was taking place. 3 months after returning from our honeymoon, Megan and I used our combined savings to purchase a new home in a neighborhood with excellent schools. Planning for the family we hoped to start soon. The down payment came partially from the money I had been able to save after stopping my support of Ryan, a tangible reminder of how boundaries had ultimately benefited everyone. Around the same time, Ryan was promoted to department manager at Target, a position of responsibility that would have seemed impossible for him just a year earlier. He called to share the news, sounding genuinely proud of achieving something through his own efforts. They said they appreciated my work ethic, he told me, the surprise evident in his voice. No one's ever said that about me before. 1 year after cutting off financial support to Ryan, I met him for coffee to discuss something that had been on my mind. I've been thinking about offering to help you create a budget and savings plan, I said cautiously, aware that financial discussions between us were still sensitive territory. Not by giving you money, I clarified quickly, but by sharing what I've learned about managing finances. Instead of taking offense, Ryan seemed relieved. I'd actually really appreciate that. I'm making decent money now, but I still find myself living paycheck to paycheck. I don't want to be doing this when I'm 40. That afternoon, we sat together at my dining room table, mapping out a budget that would allow Ryan to build an emergency fund and eventually start investing for retirement. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before, me as the provider, him as the recipient, but something healthier, 2 brothers sharing knowledge and support without unhealthy dependence. My parents, too, were finding a new equilibrium. They had downsized to a smaller house to shore up their retirement savings, a decision that my father admitted was necessary but ultimately freeing. They were learning to relate to both their sons as adults with separate lives rather than extensions of themselves. 18 months after the breaking point, Megan and I shared the news that we were expecting our first child. The joy on my parents' faces as they contemplated becoming grandparents was genuine and uncomplicated by past conflicts. They had already begun setting up a college fund for the baby, a gesture that acknowledged both the importance of education and the value of financial planning. As I prepare to become a father myself, I often reflect on the lessons of the past few years. The hardest thing I ever did, setting a boundary that cost me my family temporarily, ultimately saved us all from continuing down a destructive path. By refusing to enable behavior that was harmful to everyone involved, I created space for real growth and change. Ryan continues to build his independence. My parents are enjoying a retirement adjusted to their new financial reality. And Megan and I are preparing to welcome our child into a family with healthier boundaries and expectations than the one I grew up in. The journey wasn't easy. It required facing painful truths, weathering rejection, and standing firm in the face of intense emotional pressure. But the result, a family based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation, was worth every difficult moment. So if you're watching this and facing a similar situation with family members who see you as nothing more than a financial resource, remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. It might be the hardest decision you ever make, but it might also be the catalyst for change that everyone needs. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members over money? How did it turn out? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story helped you in any way, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about navigating complicated family dynamics. Remember, setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish, it's an act of love. Both for yourself and for those who need to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Thank you for watching, and I wish you courage on your own journey toward healthier relationships.